Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Julie Lytle, the Executive Director of Province One, and I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's presentation. This is called Deacons Talking on the Road to Emmaus, and it's a web-based series that we've designed as a way for deacons to walk with each other and to share stories about what they're doing in the hope of animating and supporting and renewing diaconal ministries all across the country. It's inspired by the story of Cleopas and the other disciple who, after recounting all of that they had experienced while walking on the road to Emmaus with a stranger, recognized that it was Jesus in their midst. Jesus' presence led them to release their fear and grief, to return to Jerusalem, to share their experience of the resurrected Christ with the gathered community, and to renew confidence in their ministry. This program is sponsored by the New England Deacons Network in partnership with the Episcopal Province of New England. That's Province One. It's a free live interactive web conference that occurs usually on the third Thursday of the month. This is going to be the last program for this academic year, and we'll start back up again in September. During our time, we usually share case studies exploring what wisdom folks have learned from the ways that they've been doing their ministry. And this month, we're going to be learning from Deacons Jackie Arbuckle and Lucy Pellegrini about the pollinators. So we are going to record it. There's many folks that weren't going to be able to join us tonight, so it will be available on the Province One website afterward. If you have questions or comments, feel free to use the chat, and I'll make sure that Jackie and Lucy hear them, and we'll have that as part of our conversation. We're going to be able to start with prayer, and I'd invite Jackie if you could lead us, and then please introduce yourselves and start telling us about your ministry.
Okay. This is a prayer from Carmen, yes, I'll get her name here, yeah, de Bernat's-Gastauld, and it's from Prayers of the Ark. And, no surprise, it's the prayer of the bee. Lord, I'm not one to despise your gifts. May you be blessed. Who spread the riches of your sweetness for my zeal. Let my small span of ardent life melt into our great communal task to lift up to your glory this temple of sweetness, a citadel of incense, a holy candle myriad-celled, molded of your graces and of my hidden work. I'm obviously a deacon in the Diocese of Vermont and have been since 1991. And for the first 16 years of my diaconal ministry, I was one of the two deacons at All Saints Episcopal Church, which I still attend actually, in South Burlington, and did a lot of kinds of ministry that I think parochial deacons do. And then my husband and I bought an inn in Waterbury Center, which necessitated moving, and I became the deacon for a couple of years at St. John's in the Mountains in Stowe. And then we moved back up towards Burlington again, and I became deacon for a couple of years at Trinity Church in Shelburne. And when the rector there left, he came to Rock Point. He actually likes to say he was born here, but because his parents were the camp directors when he was, a young child. And he's basically had this as his second home all his life. He retired and was able to get his pension and still continue with ministry. So he became a development minister out here at Rock Point. And I was watching him for a month or two and thinking, he's having fun. And I am spinning my wheels in parish ministry. I found myself creating for the third or fourth time a lay pastoral care team, in the parish. Mm-hmm. And I found myself doing all kinds of things that I had done in previous parishes. And I wasn't doing anything new. And I'm the kind of person who always has to be doing something new. I create environments. And I hadn't really done that probably since the late 80s, early 90s. So I called Craig up and I said, I'm going to follow you out to Rock Point. And I had no clue what I was going to be doing out here. And it started slowly when he asked if I could write a grant for them. And I said, sure, I can write a grant. So we talked about it and he said, well, it's due in a week. I said, okay, I'll write your grant for you. And then from there, I ended up on the board. And the grant was for us to create and to begin to create an intentional community here at Rock Point that would be dispersed. We would not live here. We would be living in our own homes. So Craig and I ended up as the co-conveners of the Rock Point Intentional Community. Our purpose is helping Rock Point and its board realize or actualize the Rock Point vision for this property. And we weren't sure what it would consist of, what we'd be doing, but for the last 4 years, we now have about 145 people on our mailing list. We've been, in Craig's words, feeling our way forward. And it's been one project after another. So in the land use plan and the forestry plan and lots of other work that we were doing here at Rock Point, I wrote a UTO grant and we got ourselves a volunteer coordinator who met this doctor called Mike Kiernan down Lucy's Way, down in Middlebury. Weybridge, isn't it, Luce?
Yes.
Yeah. And in his spare time, he's the emergency room physician at Porter Hospital. In his spare time, he had created this business called Be the Change Honey. And what he does is repurpose the wasted fields under solar arrays. And she started working with him. And then I got involved because I was coordinating her as the volunteer coordinator. Craig got involved, and the next thing we knew, we were writing a grant proposal. And that year, in 2015, a general convention created the Advisory Council for the Stewardship of Creation, and they began making grants. So we decided, well, we're going to get one of those grants. And we didn't the first go around. And by then, Emily, our volunteer coordinator, had to leave. We ran our funds, the grant was done. And so we kept it going, and we applied a second time and were given a $10,000 grant, and that launched the Pollinator project here at Rock Point. So I'm out on the edges, which is where I've spent most of my life, creating things, creating yet again something else, grant writing, getting teams of people together to pull this off. And that's the cutting edge of my diaconate. Luce?
Well, as Jackie said, I live south of Burlington. I live about an hour away from Rock Point and have felt that Rock Point has been a thin place for me. Since the early 80s, and attended numerous silent retreats and even led one at one point. But it was a place that was very important in my formation as a deacon. I have been a deacon since 2004 and have served with congregations in ministry in 3 different parishes in Addison County. So I know most of the Episcopalians in that county. And retired a couple of years ago as the chaplain, 16 years as a chaplain in a long-term care facility. I continue to do hospice work, end-of-life work, companioning those who are either with a loved one or are themselves in end of life. And I've also started doing a lot with restorative justice in Addison County. We have restorative panels, but I'm also a volunteer on a circle of support and accountability for recently released felons. And they keep creating different situations and inviting me to be a panelist. So I'm on 4 different types of panels at this point. I've returned to my roots. I started playing field hockey when I was 12 and coached for 15 years at Mount Aba High School in the district where we live. And I've gone back to coaching goalkeepers. And I've been a gardener, first watching my mother grow orchids on her sink, but never actually getting in the dirt until moving to Vermont. And so I'm a passionate, if not very accomplished gardener.
She's not being honest. She's honest about the passionate part, but
a little too humble.
And it's because I knew Lucy back when I had created Vermont Respite House back in the late 80s. And I also knew that she gardened. And that's why she's one of the people I pulled onto the steering team that I put together originally. And
it's been a great joy to be part of that.
So a pollinator project seems like a pretty big enterprise.
Well, it's turned into one.
And there's all sorts of terminology in practice that I'm not sure folks would know about or understand. Is that something you can help us into?
And then why don't I do that, and then we can play the video that we created a couple of years ago with the first grant. And that'll give all of you watching in an overview of this the first year and a half of the project. We've got a second video coming that has yet to be recorded because we are a year behind where we expected to be in terms of planting. And we're explaining in the second video why we're a year behind. But in creating the video, we decided that this was the route we were going to go, was doing a series of what might be 3 or 4 videos that will tell the story of the development of this. For people, I hope you all know that a pollinator is a creature that spreads pollen from one plant to another. Lucy's going to talk to you a little bit after the video about what happens if we don't have pollinators. And I hope that the video will give you a quick view of just what's happening. But the decline in pollinators, not only in this country, but worldwide, is more than alarming. It's positively terrifying. So let's go to the video, Julie, and then.
So here we go.
Champlain, owned by the Episcopal Church of Vermont, which has been its steward for over 160 years. A welcoming sanctuary in the heart of Burlington, Vermont's largest city. The largest undeveloped lakeshore property within the city limits, and an urban wild of mature forests, wetlands, geological attractions, rare plants, trails, and historic features. Originally deeded to provide education and a home for the bishop, and includes a conference center, chapel, summer camp, diocesan offices, community gardens, school, and miles of hiking trails. Rock Point's 35-tracker solar farm, situated on 2.5 acres, is the largest in Burlington and on any religious land in Vermont. Since 2011, the installation has provided over 100% of all the electricity used on Rock Point. Until now, the field underneath this solar array has been growing wild with invasives and weeds. Naturalists, gardeners, farmers, and school kids have voiced concern over the rapid decline in pollinators worldwide, not just in Vermont. There is widespread agreement about what contributes to the problem. First, habitat loss, followed by disease, pesticide and herbicide use, and climate change. As the website of our partner organization, Be the Change, unequivocally states, more than 1/3 of the bumblebee species in northeastern North America have vanished or are in serious decline. For example, Vermont has 17 bumblebee species. 25 years ago, we had all 17. Now we are down to 10. And of that, 7 are endangered. 4 are gone. Gone. How unusual is that? At the ordinary rate of species loss, if we lost one bumblebee species 25 years ago, we would not expect to lose the 4th until the year 3400. How long until we lose the next 3? Many people realize that monarch butterflies need milkweed to survive. Herbicides and development growth have cleared roadsides and meadows of the plants. Lose the plant, you lose the pollinator. And this is without focusing on flies, bats, and other pollinators. How can we change this spiral? We believe that we are called to treasure all of creation: creatures, water, air, and land. We are called to bring technology and education into our efforts to preserve all that we can for generations to come. Guided by faith, working with those of many faith traditions or none at all, with volunteers from around the city and state, we believe that we can be part of the transformative and creative process in restoring this part of Rock Point into a place of active and renewable life. While solar power is a green, energy-efficient way to power our property, the installation is added to the loss of habitat. We realized that Rock Point's 2.5-acre field under our solar trackers gave us an opportunity to impact 2 of the 4 causes of pollinator decline. That wasted space could become a pollinator habitat. We could ensure that our no pesticide ban is enforced throughout the property. We discovered an organization in the next county whose entire mission is to repurpose the unused space in solar fields to support our threatened pollinators. Working in partnership with Be the Change, we are undertaking the 3 to 4 year process of converting Rock Point's solar field into a pollinator-friendly meadow. 3 to 4 years? Yes, that's just the beginning. If we had started with bare soil, the time might be shorter. But there's a right way to do this and a couple of wrong ways. The right way is to follow the time frame recommended by Be the Change. There are wrong way shortcuts. For example, you could buy a package of wildflower mix and scatter it over the soil, creating a wildflower garden. It will yield a year or 2 of pretty wildflowers, and then it will convert to field as the stronger and more invasive plants take over. Or you could rush it. Converting the whole area in 1 year would defeat the purpose of protection by destroying all the bees and other pollinators that nest in the ground. This would also produce a monster crop of new plantings, requiring an impossible amount of labor-intensive work. Our recommendation is to do it in stages. At Rock Point, we are in the first year of a several-year vegetative management plan, to be followed by several more years of intensive monitoring and care. In the end, we will have a meadow that perpetuates itself. The first year of converting a field this big and overgrown 2.5 acres, is to divide it into 3 or 4 portions. The first portion only is mowed or brush hogged and then mowed, and then repeatedly tilled until it is almost too late to plant anything. At that point, the section is cover cropped until spring. Mowing makes it possible to till the soil. The repeated tilling gets rid of seeds that have sprouted and stubborn plants that have tried to regrow. After a number of tillings, they'll mostly give up. And then the cover crop of buckwheat or winter rye or oats will help smother weed regrowth and provide the soil nutrients while growing and when plowed under in the spring. Considering a pollinator project? Talk with a farmer's or university extension service in your locale to learn the timing for cover cropping, as well as the best seed to use for your soil and climate. Talk to organic gardeners, naturalists, and beekeepers about habitat and native flowering plants and pollinators. In part 2 of our video series, we will share with you what we'll be doing once spring comes to Vermont, which is usually the day before summer. Use the intervening time to read up on pollinators, develop your own plant and seed list for your locale, create the plan for your demonstration garden, get some funding, and start educating the public you serve. We'll be back in about 4 months. Jackie, Mike, Lucy, Craig, Gus, Kara, Isaac, and Chuck.
Wow. It's quite an enterprise.
And what happened in those 4 months, by the time spring started coming, was, and this was a year ago, we realized that the roots were nowhere near ready for us to work that soil in terms of permanent plantings. The ragweed was well entrenched. The goldenrod was well entrenched. And goldenrod's a great pollinator plant, but you don't want an entire field of it.
And the comfrey.
And the comfrey, oh gosh, yes. So that we knew that we needed to do another whole year of tilling. So we spent that winter on the steering committee. What we started doing was recruiting volunteers to start a docent program. And once we have the garden up and going, they will be tour guides and teachers for the public. And we spent the winter educating ourselves, building a plant list, which is pretty extensive. We decided to do it the right way. So we did it with botanical names, common names, divided it into trees and shrubs and what kind of soil they liked and what kind of bloom time we were looking at, because this garden has to go from early spring until the end of fall. Building the docent program, and they started studying things. And during the course of the winter, we began to shift our focus from honeybees to bumblebees, partly from the information on the video and real concern over what's happening in the Northeast with the bumblebee population, which are far more prolific pollinators than honeybees. And we're not ignoring honeybees. We have apiarists who live here on the property, but we do not see that as any more concerning than the wild bee population. So Luz said she'd tackle what's going to happen if we do lose them all, or even if we lose a significant amount more, and why we're losing them.
Well, one of the things that was touched on in the video and that Jackie just indicated is that there are many different types of pollinators: hummingbirds, ants, butterflies, wasps, things that live above ground and below ground. And well, we do focus on honeybees and bumblebees because they're so cute in some ways. They're a lot cuter than a wasp. We really are trying to promote and protect a habitat for all of these critters. One of the things that Mike has said is when he did his first planting under panels was that the year that they planted them, he and a volunteer walked through and they counted the number of pollinators they saw in a specific period of time on a specific day with a specific temperature, and went back a year later after they had planted and the meadow had started to come up, and the number was 5 times what they had seen. So just in a year, with returning that to a native meadow, it made a tremendous difference. And we're hoping that we can see the same thing.
We've started a count, by the way.
So that's one beginning. That's a way to document, because our hope is that this will become a project that other dioceses or individual churches or communities around the country can adapt to their own use. So think about a summer picnic if summer ever comes. We figured it'll come someday in July in Vermont right now. So think about a picnic. Think about, berry pies. Without pollinators, there are no berries. PB&J sandwiches for the kids. No PB or J. No watermelon, no avocados for guacamole, no lemons for lemonade or water or gin and tonics, no fruit salad unless you want only pineapple, which would not be my choice, no tzatziki, no peach cobbler or apple pie, and shish kebabs, well, no veggies, obviously, in between the meats, no peppers, onions, tomatoes, zucchini. But there might also not be any beef because pollinators also take care of clover and different types of hay, making it difficult for farmers and those who raise livestock to feed their flocks. So what's happened in terms of numbers? According to an Obama mandated study in 2015, prior to that time, 1/4 to 1/3 of honeybee hives were lost each winter. They just didn't make it through the winter. In 2016, 44% didn't make it through. And more hives were lost during the summer season than had ever been previously recorded. Almond producers rely almost totally on hives. So in 2003, the cost for a hive was $52. In 2016, one hive would cost $200. That's a tremendous increase. Wow. And hive collapse has become even more prevalent. According to that report, 90 different commercially grown crops are dependent on pollination by honeybees or bumblebees. Honeybees contribute $15 billion to the United States economy through pollination. Native insect pollination contributes another $9 billion. But bees are really susceptible to illnesses. Many hives overwinter in the South if they're not privately owned, and they're transported around the country, often on large flatbed trucks. Sorry about that. If one of those hives is infected with mites or with disease, it can contaminate the whole truck. Familiarity breeds contempt in that way. And those trucks go around the country. So why is this happening? I don't know, many of us probably remember that Joni Mitchell song that included, give me spots of my apples, but save me the birds and the bees. Most of what is happening is due to pesticides and insecticides. The most prevalent one, and one that we can all have an impact on simply by not buying the plants, are neonicotinoids or neonics, which affect the nervous system of pollinators. 70% of pollinators are ground dwellers, and neonics can be delivered as a dust, as a spray or a drench, and then you deal with runoff. If plants are dusted, wind distribution can contribute to drift to fields that haven't been dusted. Often the seeds are treated, which means then that the contaminant goes into the soil, and it can leach into groundwater, which is taken up by unintended or untreated plants. So it stays in the ground, it stays in our compost heaps for a long, long time. Its shelf life can be months or years. Another pesticide is chloropyrifos, which also affects the nervous system, and the EPA has finally indicated that even a single application of that insecticide poses significant risks, especially to endangered species and also to us. It's a cancer. It's linked to cancers. It's used both as an insecticide and an herbicide, but it's banned in use on agriculture that will be consumed. I don't know how individuals necessarily try and avoid hitting plants that, say, cattle may consume, but that's its cost to the environment. Mm-hmm. Roundup, glyphosate, another cancer-causing risk, and that's used as an herbicide. 7 is a long existing herbicide. One of the components is a carbaryl, which became very noteworthy because it was what was the contributing factor in the Bhopal disaster in India. And it claims to kill over 500 species of insects. Overuse of nitrogen-rich fertilizers also creates algae blooms, contributing to lake toxicity and rise in water temperature. In terms of habitat loss, we've lost many open spaces through development. And for pollinators that migrate, the destruction of the migration route, draining of lakes or deforestation, highway and other construction projects, airports, all impact the health of the species. Golf courses with intense management of green space with herbicide and fertilizers have a tremendous impact, obviously, on ground dwellers and any pollinator that might have used the forest or the meadows that were there previously. The loss of hedgerows in between fields as everyone tries to neaten things up, those were important for migrating pollinators as well as the ones that don't migrate. The lack of diversity in farms is a big thing in Vermont. We've lost so many small farms, and some of the small farms that do exist have become organic farms and are very aware of pollinator issues. But some become focused on one particular type of product, which eliminates the diversity that supports diverse pollinators. Manure pits and problems with putting manure on, liquid manure or spreading manure on fields in the winter is banned in Vermont. It is also, there's a fine, but sometimes there's no other place to put it. So it ends up there on a backfield and then runs down into a stream during one of our thaws and then ends up in the lake. We know that large buildings that have been built in migratory flight paths have taken a tremendous toll on migratory birds. So have intense hurricanes, floods, and blizzards, which seem to be more prevalent as we battle climate change. There also is a lack of coordination between land and water management, as well as city planners, which doesn't take into account particularly the long-term impact on water. Even the use of irrigation, which may focus on one particular crop, can deplete groundwater and catchments that have supplied water sources for communities. A shift in temperature and climate change can mean a change in pollen production versus when bees are more likely to feed. Even just 3 or 4 days can have a tremendous impact on a hive, which relies on pollen to feed the developing bees. Exceptional hot spells affect blooms in the lakes, also affects the maturation time in the fields, affects hay cuttings, affects water levels, and affects pollinators. The health of the foods that they eat affects the health of the pollinators. And at this point, there is a gut parasite that has been identified that impacts bees, but it impacts far less in cooler climates than it does as things heat up. The question is not whether, but it's a fact that we all need to act on this now. Whether we have a small private garden with just a few posies, or whether we're creating our own small pollinator plot, or whether we change how we view water and our contribution to climate change.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One of the things that we're working, once we get this planted this year, is, and it's part of the second grant that we have from the Davis Foundation, creating or actually joining forces with other neighbors from this particular area. But I think Lucy described it well. The migratory routes. It's one thing to plant a garden, and it's essential, and anybody can do it. But if you can connect your garden to the one next door or the one down the road, bees have a radius of about a couple of miles. What we're planning is to take the garden here at Rock Point, the meadow, and connect it to Burlington's Intervale, which is across the north part of the city, across Beltline, that was built out there, etc. So it's going to involve networking with everyone from the state on down to, the stakeholders of all of the intervening properties. But I think we can do it. And there are other states that are looking at the same thing. Minnesota is one of them. So that we will not only have the garden here and the demonstration garden, which will be for education of everyone from school kids to church groups to for-profit businesses, etc. But then we will have it connected over several miles of terrain between our property and the Intervale, which is also developing a pollinator garden, and everything in between, mainly to mitigate all that development that's happened in between instead. So I think, as we pointed out in the video, you can do it in your own backyard. You can do it in the backyard of your parish or the front yard. In one parish I was in, we talked about planting a vegetable garden in the front yard. What a thought. On the main street of town. But you have to prepare it. If you throw a packet of wildflower seeds on, you might get a few plants, but they won't be there 2 years down the road. And we learned that, and actually when you advertised this, Julie, the soil that was in the photograph,
Mm-hmm.
when we saw that soil finally appear at the end of this past winter, it was like, we have real dirt here now. No roots, no weeds, no nothing. Right now it's mud, but anyway, that's when we knew that we were ready to start planting this year. So it took us an extra year, but we will be putting it in, as soon as that soil dries out some. And from there, we've done 1/3 of the field. The other 2/3 will be tilled and prepared this year. And next year we'll be planting that section. But most of the field will be sown to a pollinator mix that a local business puts together that's specifically for the Northeast. And you can get the mixes for different parts of the country that you live in. American Meadows is the company, and they're one of the biggest in the country that put these packets together. But they also do it like 50 pounds at a time. And that's exactly how we'll be doing most of the field. The garden itself, the demonstration garden, will actually be hand planting hundreds of plants.
Over 1,000.
Yeah, over 1,000. Some of which are not easy to start from seed. Others of which we just want to get the plants there so that we can get them identified, so that we can get the public in there and start guiding them with walks through this garden, which will give them ideas for what plants they could put into their own yards. There are people in the north end of Burlington that have done this on the green strip between the sidewalk and the road. That's public property, and nobody asked permission. They just started doing it, and that's exactly what we want to do with this whole pollinator corridor that will extend across the city.
So what you're talking about is awfully comprehensive.
Yes.
And it sounds like there's big things and little things.
Yep.
What's something that's bite-sized that you can challenge us to do to help without getting overwhelmed by thinking about multi-years and investments in trying to do something as big as your solar panel system?
One of the first things I think is going out in the backyard and poking holes in the ground. Lucy mentioned that 70% of native bees nest in the ground. They don't live in hives like honeybees do. They fight with mice for those holes. But your queen bee is going to go into that hole, and you see the queens out now because they're the great big bumblebees, and they're the first ones out, and what they're doing is collecting pollen and to begin to build the nest underground where they can lay their eggs and feed the larvae. So Mike is fond of telling us he goes around with a broomstick, and if there's a pile of hay or a compost pile or a pile of leaves, poke holes in it.
Okay.
I mean, it's that simple, because in doing that, you've just created housing for bumblebees. Don't reach for the raid when you see them.
Another thing you could do is check to see we're all eager to get plants in the ground.
Yeah.
But check to see whether they've been treated with neonics.
Oh, yes.
There are, and I'm going to name them, Lowe's has said after 2019, they will no longer sell treated plants or seeds that have been treated. Same with True Value, but it's after this planting season. So unless they can verify, I think every Lowe's is different. But unless they can verify that, don't buy your plants there. Don't put those in your garden. Break that cycle. So that's another thing that we can all try. And another thing is to get a water barrel and water your plants that way, so that the runoff will hopefully continue to feed the streams, which are bearing the brunt in the watersheds of contamination. But let that water run free. Don't use pesticides. Hand pick those stupid potato bugs. Squash the squash bugs. Try not to worry about any spiders that you see.
Yeah, leave them alone.
Just back away. They seem like small things, but they're big things for those pollinators. Feed your hummingbirds, but not with a red dye solution. Simple sugar and water. Right. Is all you need to do. And there are nesting boxes that you can buy. Gardener Supply is one place that you can buy them, that have little tiny holes where small wasps and different kinds of bees can also nest. Challenge with that is you actually have to clean them out every year, which is sometimes difficult, and sometimes you can just buy inserts to go in next year. Okay. But all those are individual things.
One of the major things that you can do and should be doing is stop mowing your lawn so closely. Mm-hmm. Grass that's an inch long has roots that are an inch long. And think about that a little bit. If you let it grow to 3 or 4 inches in length, you're going to have grass roots that are 3 or 4 inches in length. So you're going to have a healthier lawn, much more weed-free, and you don't need to weed it with herbicides. And don't be so quick to get rid of the dandelions in it, because pollinators love them. And
they need them.
And they're not going to hurt your lawn. It may hurt your reputation. The neighbors may not like it, but just stop the turf care that we have made a habit of in this country, and things would rapidly start improving. And if you really have the energy, then take a section of the yard and plant specific plants. And you want them not just for nectar and pollen, you want them to feed the larvae too. Monarch butterflies cannot live without milkweed, mm-hmm. because that's what their larvae eat, and that's all they eat.
Another thing is to not over fertilize. Mm-hmm. My choice would be to not fertilize at all, and my lawn has bare spots. Mm-hmm. I really don't care. Right. But the dependence on the high nitrogen fertilizers really has an impact on our watersheds.
Catherine Cook is also offering the suggestion that it's helpful to sprinkle wheat germ on potato plants to discourage the potato bugs. Yeah. So there's a lot of natural ways for us to do some of the herbicide kind of treatments without getting into the chemicals that can be so harmful.
Oh, yeah.
What else do we need to know? It's sounding like there are things that are individual that we can do. There are things that are communal that we can do. There's some cultural elements like changing how we think about our green lawns. Are there legislative or other institutional ways that we need to address this as well?
City of Burlington in the last 2 years has passed a number of ordinances and city council designed to make Burlington pollinator friendly, a walkable city. You know, Lucy mentioned the trails here at Rock Point, and we're conserving this land here. And combining our trails with the trails on the Arms Forest next door, which is 30 acres of land with trails. That's a lot of walkable land in an urban area like Burlington.
Yeah. It's important to see how all of the different elements coalesce to be able to move toward the common goal. When we're doing things individually and collectively, we can have so much greater of an impact, especially when there are legislative ways that are supporting us in doing those efforts.
Right.
The demonstration garden too, which we really haven't talked about. There's a conscious plan of what to plant, where to plant it, how to leave open space so that school groups can sit on logs that have been taken off the property, cut logs into stumps so that kids can perch and see what's going on and really get down at eye level with their plants, and talk, show what a hive is. But there's also a sense of, or a hope to make that an area for peace, for reflection, for meditation, honoring all the traditions, Abenaki, Buddhist, as well as Christian and Muslim and Jewish, all of those cultures, and trying to bring people in from different communities that can contribute their wisdom and their sense of the sacredness of creation.
We've got about 5 minutes. If anyone that's on the program would like to type questions or comments to add, there are a few that I can read to Jackie and Lucy. Elizabeth has shared that small white leaf clover is a great alternative for filling in bare spots in lawns rather than worrying about fertilizing and treating things.
Right.
And Catherine sharing that the Vermont state legislature is working on clean waters in streams, rivers, and the lake. To ask what the legislatures are doing, we can help advocate, and that's a great way to look at the whole ecology and how it's working together.
There are states that have passed laws that if you're going to put a solar array on your property, that you must use the area underneath it for pollinator or other such uses.
Well, obviously, we've been given the responsibility to be stewards of creation.
Right.
We're the ones that are messing things up. We're going to be the ones that can change that. And you've given sorts of resources to be able to use. If there's information that you'd like us to share, I'd be happy to link our Province One website with the information that you're creating so that anyone who wants to go further with understanding the pollinators and what we can do in our local context to be able to add to those corridors that are giving pathways for all of the different pollinators to move across, that we can be supporting them in our own local context.
Right.
So I'd be happy to work with you on doing that.
Good. Well, the idea is to get pollinators in our own backyards and not have to be trucking them all across the country.
Exactly.
To take care of crops.
Do you have any last thoughts or wisdom that you'd like to share with us?
I'm reading what Tom has added here.
Oh, there we go. Bishop Ely has offered his thanks, and I will add mine. There's a wonderful ministry going on at Rock Point, and every day is Earth Day there, is what Tom is sharing with us. the two of you are what remarkable disturbance of deacons in Vermont. And I guess that's a challenge that we all can carry as part of our discipleship. How can we be the disturbances that help to keep this kind of a mission and ministry obvious in our everyday life choices? I'm very grateful for the province, for you to have shared your story with us and for us to get great ideas on how we can move forward with helping to build those networks for the pollinators to find support. I appreciate everyone being a part of this important conversation. There's always more that can be said than an hour can offer, but hopefully it's a prompt for everyone to continue the conversation, to explore what resources exist, and to be able to together act to be able to better support the creation that we've been given to steward. As I've mentioned, there is a recording of this program that we'll have posted shortly on the Province One website. Folks that are interested should look under the diaconal ministry link, and you'll see a link for a video archive, and that's where you can find it. I'd like to go ahead.
Could visit the Rock Point website too, because we keep that up to date.
We'll make sure that the link to the video that we shared and the resources to Rock Point are all a part of the links on the Care of Creation page on the Province One website as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
For the rest of us, I'd like to offer the Benedictine, Franciscan benediction as a way of closing our time together. It's a way of maybe holding us accountable for saying yes to all the things that Lucy and Jackie have challenged us to think about today. So if you could take a moment to take a deep breath and pause and listen as I offer this prayer. May God bless us with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live deep within our hearts. May God bless us with anger at injustice, oppression, and the exploitation of people, so that we may work for justice and freedom and peace. May God bless us with tears to shed for those who are suffering pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort others, and that we can hopefully turn their pain into joy. And may God bless us with enough boldness and foolishness to believe that we can make a difference in this world, that we can do what others claim cannot be done, and that we can bring justice and kindness to all our children and the poor. We ask this all in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all and have a great week.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks so much, Julie, for coordinating all this.
Oh, yeah.
My pleasure. Oh, thank you.
I look forward to it.